I thought my husband's funeral marked the end of my pain, until I saw my daughter-in-law hide a secret that unraveled everything. What followed was betrayal, danger, and a truth that shattered my family but freed my soul. This is one of those inspirational stories where survival means choosing truth over silence, and inspirational stories often begin with unbearable loss. Before we go any further, may God bless you and keep you. May you never lack health, love, or hope on your journey. And right now, let us know where you're watching from. I once thought the day I buried my husband would be the most painful day of my life. I was wrong. That morning, the Atlanta sky was an unnatural gray, as if the whole city had decided to hold its breath out of respect for a man who had just left this world. The Baptist church, where we held the funeral, was packed. Friends, former colleagues, people who used to call my husband a good, upright man, came one by one to shake my hand, hug me, and whisper condolences that all sounded so similar they barely meant anything at all. I stood there in a simple black dress, my hands clasped together, forcing my back to stay straight. I didn't cry out loud. I only felt a cold emptiness spreading inside my chest, as if someone had removed something vital and forgotten the anesthesia. My name is Marianne Lewis. My husband's name was Caleb Lewis, and until that morning, I believed I knew that man better than anyone else on this earth. Caleb was the kind of man who was always on time, always careful, always aware of where he stood in life. He wasn't perfect, but he was steady, a pillar, a husband I truly believed had never kept anything from me large enough to destroy our marriage. The funeral followed the usual script. The pastor read from the Bible. The choir sang familiar hymns. Soft crying drifted from the first few rows. I nearly let my mind drift away until something very small, but very wrong, pulled me back into the room. I saw Naomi. Naomi is my son's wife. She was standing in the second row, not far from me. A young, beautiful woman who had always seemed gentle and considerate ever since she married into our family. I had never had a reason to doubt her. I had even thought myself lucky that my son had chosen a wife who knew how to carry herself. But as people stepped forward to view Caleb one last time, I noticed Naomi move more slowly than the others. She leaned closer to the casket than necessary, and in that brief moment, I saw her hand slide quickly toward the inside breast pocket of Caleb's suit. Just one small movement. Quick, clean, practiced. She slipped something into my husband's vest pocket. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was only a keepsake, a private gesture young people make. I told myself that. I wanted to believe it. But the look in Naomi's eyes when she straightened up did not belong to a grieving woman. It was sharp, alert, and watchful. When our eyes met, she flinched. Then she smiled. A smile so quick that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. I said nothing. I didn't cause a scene. A funeral is not the place for questions. But from that moment on, I no longer heard the prayers clearly. Inside my head, only one question remained, beating over and over like a pulse in my chest. What did Naomi just do? After everything ended, after the casket was closed and taken away, after the final embraces were exchanged, I told everyone I wanted to stay alone for a few more minutes. No one objected. People tend to grant widows the right to silence. When the church was nearly empty, I stepped closer to the casket. My hands trembled slightly as they touched the smooth black fabric. I whispered a goodbye that might have come too late. Then I did something I had never imagined doing in my entire life. I reached into my husband's inside pocket. My fingers touched a thin envelope. It was ivory-colored, slightly worn, the edges frayed as if it had been taken out and put away many times. On the front was a handwritten name so familiar it hurt to look at it. Marianne Caleb's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. The slight slant, the firm strokes, just like the notes he used to leave in the kitchen notebook. I pulled the envelope out, my heart pounding so hard, my ears rang. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there holding it, feeling as though I was carrying something that didn't belong to the present, something from another version of my life, where everything had gone off course a long time ago. Inside the envelope were two things: a small metal key heavier than it looked, with a single number engraved on it, 19, and a folded piece of paper, creased into thirds. I unfolded it with what little care I had left in me, Marianne. If you're reading this, it means I no longer have the chance to explain in person. There are things I held onto for too long. There are people you should not trust. Do not look for answers in this house. And please, no matter what happens, prepare yourself for the truth. Caleb, I had to read the note 3 times before every word truly sank in. There are people you should not trust. Not one person. People. I thought immediately of Naomi. I thought of my son. I thought of every family dinner, every hug, every laugh I had believed was real. Suddenly, the house I had lived in for nearly 40 years appeared in my mind like a stage one where I had only ever been an audience member, while the most important roles had been rehearsed behind my back for a very long time. That night, I went home alone. I told no one about the envelope. I didn't confront Naomi. I didn't call my son. I placed the key on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. The number 19 stirred no memory at all. No room, no locker, no drawer. And as I looked around the familiar kitchen, where I once believed I knew every scratch on the tabletop, I finally understood what Caleb meant. The answers were not here. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of grief, but because, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing in front of a door that had been locked for decades, and the key was already in my hand. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't the familiar grief of a widow, nor the hollow aftermath of a funeral. What I felt was clarity, a cold, sharp clarity, like the moment you realize the house you're living in is no longer safe, and you need to know exactly who laid the foundation for its collapse. The key marked 19 was still on the kitchen table where I'd left it the night before. Early sunlight hit it just right, and the dull metal reflected a thin line of light. I picked it up and turned it slowly in my hand. No logo, no symbol, just a single number, engraved neatly, as if it had never been rushed. Caleb never did anything in a hurry. I made coffee, but I didn't drink it. I leaned against the kitchen counter and looked out at the backyard where we'd planted a small maple tree 20 years ago. I thought about the letter, "Don't look for answers in this house." That sentence echoed in my head, clearer than the morning birds outside. If not the house. Caleb had worked in logistics for 30 years. He was familiar with warehouses, storage units, the kinds of places most people overlook. And then, like a delayed reflex, I remembered a small detail. A few months before he died, Caleb had complained about needing to check on an old place without ever saying where. At the time, I didn't press him. Now, I wished I had. I got in the car and drove south of the city. Morning traffic in Atlanta was heavy, but my mind was eerily empty. I focused on one thing only: finding a place that matched an anonymous key and the number 19. Pine Ridge Storage sat near the highway, tucked behind a row of aging warehouses. I'd driven past it hundreds of times without ever noticing. A faded sign, a few security cameras, a small office with glass doors covered in monthly rental ads. I didn't know why I pulled in. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was because the name Pine Ridge suddenly felt strangely familiar. I walked into the office. The woman behind the reception desk looked up and offered the polite smile of someone accustomed to strangers. "I need to access a storage unit," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. She asked for the name Caleb Lewis, I replied. She typed for a few seconds, then stopped. "It was Confirmation Unit 19, she said. "Mr. Lewis has rented it here for almost 4 years. Paid annually. 4 years." I swallowed hard. 4 years was long enough to build a secret, and long enough for me to have known absolutely nothing. She slid a form across the counter. When I took the pen, my hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the feeling that I was signing my name into an entirely different chapter of my life. Unit 19 was at the very end of the row, a gray metal door, no different from the others, except for the small black number mounted above it. I inserted the key. It fit perfectly. When the roll-up door lifted, the smell of metal and old paper spilled out. The unit wasn't large, but it was organized with an almost unsettling precision. No random clutter, no trash, no forgotten items, only things that had been kept on purpose. An old leather suitcase, 3 cardboard boxes labeled in Caleb's handwriting, and a small metal filing cabinet secured with a combination lock. I opened the suitcase first. Inside were clothes, not clothes that belonged to the Caleb I knew. They were younger, different. Women's blouses, scarves, a deep blue dress. I touched the fabric, feeling something both familiar and foreign. These weren't mine, and I was certain I'd never seen them in my house. The first box contained photographs, not family photos, not vacation pictures, but scattered images taken at different times. A black woman, younger than me by a few years, standing in various places. A bus stop, a park, a small apartment building. She wasn't looking at the camera, as if she didn't know she was being photographed. The second box held letters. Not love letters. Handwritten notes, short, practical, sometimes more like reminders than correspondence. I read a few lines, my heart beginning to pound. I've transferred the money. I won't appear publicly. She can't know. There was no need to specify who she was. I understood all too well. The third box forced me to sit down on the concrete floor. Inside was a thin folder. A name was written on the cover. Lena Moore. I had never heard that name in my life. The folder contained copies of a lease agreement, several medical receipts, and a blurry photocopy of a birth certificate. But under emergency contact, one name was typed clearly in plain computer font. Caleb Lewis. It felt as if someone had yanked the ground out from under me. Caleb hadn't just lived another life. He'd carried another responsibility. Another human being had depended on him, existing alongside my marriage. All this time, I sat there for a long while in Unit 19, surrounded by evidence I wasn't yet ready to name. And then I realized something that sent a chill straight down my spine. Among all of it, there was nothing to indicate that Lena Moore was dead. On the contrary, the most recent documents were from less than a year ago, which meant Lena was still alive. And if Lena was alive, the next questions were unavoidable. What did she know about me? And what did she have to do with Naomi? I closed the storage door and locked it carefully, as if afraid someone might steal this secret from me. As I walked back to my car, my phone vibrated. A message from Naomi. Mom, are you okay? For the first time, I wasn't reading a message from my daughter-in-law with trust. I was reading it like a move in a chess game I had only just realized I was part of. I didn't reply. I started the car and drove away, with only one thought in my mind. Unit 19 wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I didn't go home right after leaving Unit 19. I drove around the city, as if Atlanta had suddenly become too small for all the thoughts colliding inside my head. Lena Moore. The name clung to me, persistent, heavy. A woman who was still alive, a parallel life. A part of Caleb I had never been allowed to touch. And Naomi. I couldn't stop thinking about Naomi. Her message was still sitting on my phone screen. I'm worried about you, Mom. A sentence that sounded harmless enough, yet now it sent a chill down my spine. I started to wonder, was Naomi worried about me? Or was she watching me? I decided not to reply right away. Not out of anger, but because I needed time. Caleb had written, "There are people you should not trust." I didn't know exactly who he meant, but I was beginning to understand that my trust needed to be conserved now, not handed out the way it used to be. That afternoon, I stopped by my son's house. Marcus lived about a 15-minute drive away, in a new, quiet subdivision. Their house looked perfect in the way society expects perfection. Neatly trimmed grass, spotless windows, no sign that the people inside might be hiding anything at all. Naomi answered the door. She smiled when she saw me, a familiar smile that, just a week ago, would have brought me comfort. But today, I noticed smaller things. The way her eyes flicked quickly over my shoulder, as if checking whether I'd come with someone. The way her hand lingered on the door a second longer than necessary. Tilting her head, I texted you and didn't hear back. I was tired last night, I said. My voice was calm, almost flat. I needed some quiet. Naomi nodded, but I saw her shoulders relax slightly. A very small gesture, but enough for me to register it. People only relax when they feel the danger has passed, for now. Marcus came out of the living room. My son looked exhausted, older than he had just days ago at the funeral. He hugged me, tighter than usual. I'm sorry about all of this, Marcus said softly. Dad, he was gone so suddenly. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the living room, where I had once sat drinking tea, laughing, believing this was an ordinary young family. Now everything looked like a carefully constructed set. Naomi, I said, after a moment, did you know your father-in-law ever rented a storage unit? The question landed in the room like a pebble dropped into still water. Naomi blinked. Just once, but too fast. No, she said. I've never heard him mention anything like that. Marcus shook his head. I didn't know either. Dad didn't talk much about work. Reasonable answers. Too reasonable. But Naomi's eyes were no longer on me. She was looking down at her hands. I shifted direction. Did your father ever have an old friend named Lena Moore? This time, Naomi didn't answer right away. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about, Mom? I've never heard that name. Naomi looked up and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Maybe an old coworker? Dad knew a lot of people. But inside my head, a small alarm had started ringing. I didn't stay long. I said I had errands to run. Naomi walked me to the door, her hand resting lightly on my arm. If you need anything, just tell me, she said. I'm here. Here. The word suddenly felt heavy. On the drive home, I began piecing together small memories I had once ignored. Naomi moved to Atlanta around the same time Caleb started traveling for work more often. Naomi had always taken a particular interest in his health, especially during his last year. And most importantly, Naomi had been the only person close enough to slip that envelope into Caleb's pocket without drawing attention. That evening, I reopened Lena Moore's file in my mind. A black woman, living quietly, staying out of the public eye. A child? There was no document proving it, but nothing ruling it out, either. Then a thought stopped me in the middle of the living room. What if Naomi didn't just know Lena? What if Naomi was the thread connecting the past and the present? I picked up my phone and opened social media. I had never looked at Naomi this way before. I scrolled through old photos, the wedding, vacations, family gatherings, and then I noticed something strange. In many of the pictures, Naomi stood slightly off-center, as if she didn't want to be captured too clearly. I zoomed in on an old photo taken at a park years ago. In the background, nearly cut out of the frame, stood another woman, looking straight at Naomi. My heart began to race. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I was frightening myself. But I had learned something over the last 2 days. The most dangerous things are often hidden behind the word maybe. I decided to do something I had always avoided before. I began investigating my daughter-in-law, not by confronting her, but by listening, watching, and waiting for her to make a mistake. That night, I received another message from Naomi. Sleep well, Mom. If you need to talk, I'm always here. I stared at the words for a long time before setting my phone down. I no longer saw concern in that message. I saw presence. And as I turned off the lights and lay down in the house that had once been the safest place I knew, I understood something clearly. This story was no longer about the dead. It was beginning to revolve around the living. We put a whole lot of time and heart into bringing this story to life. If you don't like it, go on and hit that like button. And if you do like it, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Now then. I didn't call Lena Moore right away. After everything I had uncovered, one thing was painfully clear to me. The truth is not always meant to be dragged into the light too quickly. Some secrets, if touched at the wrong moment, will turn around and bite the person searching for them. I needed to prepare. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I could find about Lena Moore. There wasn't much. An old address on the west side of the city. A phone number that had changed 3 times in 10 years. No public social media. No noise. No trail. Lena lived like someone who deliberately refused to leave a shadow. That unsettled me more than any discovery so far. Caleb had maintained contact with a woman like that for years, while I, his wife, knew nothing. And Naomi, I still couldn't pin down her true role in this web. On the morning of the third day, I drove to the old neighborhood where Lena had once rented an apartment. It was a worn-down area, rows of red brick houses pressed close together, weeds overtaking the front yards. I didn't expect to find Lena there. I only wanted to feel the space she had lived in, as a way of touching a part of Caleb's past I had been excluded from. I was standing in front of a vacant house when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering, Marianne Lewis, a woman's voice low, rough, without hesitation. This is she. I thought you might be looking for me. I didn't ask who she was. I knew where are you, I asked, a cafe on Auburn Avenue, near the old church. If you want to talk, I'll be here for another 30 minutes. The call ended before I could respond. I sat in the car for a long time. My hands on the steering wheel, my heartbeat steady but heavy. I didn't know whether this was a trap or a coincidence. But one thing was clear. Lena Moore knew I was looking for her, and that meant, possibly, that I was being watched too. The cafe was small, dimly lit, the air tinged with burnt coffee. I recognized Lena immediately, not because she looked exactly like the photos from Unit 19, but because of the way she sat, straight-backed, not leaning into the chair, both hands resting on the table like someone accustomed to being ready to stand at any moment. Lena Moore was a black woman in her 50s. Time had left its marks on her face, but her eyes were sharp, alert. When I approached, she looked at me as if she'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. You look the way I imagined, Lena said. Calm. Controlled, so do you, I replied as I sat down. Not like someone living in secrecy. Lena gave a thin smile. Living in secrecy doesn't mean living in fear. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Not awkward silence, but measured silence. Two women bound by the same man, standing on opposite sides of the truth. You know my husband is dead, I said. Caleb deliberately left behind. I took a slow breath. Why? She looked out the window because he knew time was running out. And because he knew that when everything came apart, there was only one person clear-headed enough to handle it. Me, I asked. Lena turned back to me. You. I wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or insulted. You and Caleb, I began, then stopped. I didn't know what to call that relationship. It's not what you think, Lena said, as if reading my mind. I wasn't his lover. I was the woman he left behind. The words landed between us like a weight. Lena told me a different story about Caleb, not the husband, not the father, but a young man driven by ambition, a man who made promises he didn't have the courage to keep. Lena had once believed Caleb would leave his stable life and choose her. In the end, he chose the safe path. He never came back, Lena said. But he never fully disappeared either. And Naomi, I asked directly. For the first time, Lena hesitated. Naomi is part of the story I don't control, she said slowly. She knows more than you think, and less than she wants you to believe. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean? Lena leaned closer. Lowering her voice, Naomi didn't come into your family only for love. But it's not just revenge either. Then, what? I asked. Lena studied me for a long moment before answering. For the truth, but not in a clean way. I wanted to ask more, but Lena stood up. I can't say anything else today, she said. There are people who don't want you and me sitting at the same table. Who? I asked. Lena slipped on her coat, her eyes scanning the cafe. You'll find out soon enough. Before leaving, she placed a small piece of paper on the table. An address, a date, a time. If you want to understand who Caleb really was, Lena said, you have to go there. But don't go alone. I held the paper, my heart pounding. When I looked up, Lena was gone. That evening, when I returned home, the living room lights were on. Naomi was sitting on the couch, holding my teacup, as if this were still our shared home. I stopped by, she said with a smile. Where have you been all day, Mom? I looked at Naomi. We're for wanting the sight of very by scented. I stopped occasion in telling the scenting the scissori, then at the slip of paper in my coat pocket, and I understood. The circles were beginning to close. I didn't answer Naomi's question right away. She was sitting in my living room like she owned the place, my teacup resting comfortably in her hands, legs crossed, shoulders relaxed. Naomi had always known how to make her presence look reasonable. Before, I would have called it care. Now, I saw only this. She believed she had a right to be here, and she wanted me to get used to that fact. I stepped out for a bit. I said evenly, I had a few things to take care of. Did anyone go with you? Naomi asked immediately, too fast, purely reflex. A small question. But to me, it was a hook. No, I replied. I went by myself. Naomi nodded and smiled, but her eyes darkened for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to know she was measuring something. I walked straight into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator as if I were looking for something, while my mind was fixed on the slip of paper Lena had left me. An address, a date, a time. I hadn't read it closely in front of Naomi, and I had no intention of letting her know it existed. I had learned that secrets, if they're going to survive, must be hidden from the right people. Want me to make more tea? Naomi asked. No. I said, you should head home. I'm tired. She stood up slowly. Before leaving, Naomi turned back and looked at me with the gentle expression a daughter-in-law is supposed to have. But behind it, I saw something else, like a thin sheet of glass. I'm worried about you, she said. You're doing everything on your own. You don't have to. I only nodded. When the door closed, my house fell silent, like a room that had just been drained of oxygen. I took the slip of paper out. The address was in the eastern outskirts, near an old industrial zone. Raven Park. Time. Beneath it, Lena had written one short line. Don't let Naomi know. I stood there, staring at the words like a warning that had arrived too late. Naomi had just been in my house. She might already know, or she might be guessing. And if Lena was right, if there were people who didn't want us to meet, then Friday night wouldn't just be an appointment. It could be a trap. I couldn't go alone, but I couldn't call Marcus either. My son was caught between grief and confusion. If I pulled him in now, I might turn him into a target. I needed someone outside the family, someone Naomi didn't control. I thought of Angela Brooks. Angela was my closest friend from college, a tough black woman who worked as a forensic accountant for a law firm. She was the kind of person who didn't believe words until she saw numbers. And more importantly, she wasn't afraid of truths that made people uncomfortable. I called Angela that very night. I didn't tell her everything, just enough for her to understand how serious it was. Marianne, Angela said after I mentioned Unit 19 and the name Lena Moore, you're standing in the middle of a fight without knowing the rules. But fine. 8:30 I exhaled. For the first time, feeling like I wasn't completely alone. The next 2 days, I lived like someone walking a wire. I still showed up at church, accepted condolences, did everything a widow was supposed to do. Thursday night, Naomi called. You seem distant, she said. I just want to make sure you're not doing something you'll regret. I let out a quiet laugh. Not because anything was funny. Regret? I asked. What do you think I'd regret? Naomi was silent for a con of it. Second. I don't know. I just don't want you to get hurt again. Thank you. I said, I'm going to bed. I hung up before she could say anything else. By Friday, the rain was light. The kind that feels like a veil, blurring streetlights and making everything look like an old, scratched film reel. Angela drove over to pick me up. She studied me for a moment, then said, You're too calm. Are you sure you're okay? I'm not okay, I said, but I'm clear. We arrived at Raven Park at 8:20. The industrial area had once been filled with factories and warehouses, but most of it was abandoned now. Low buildings, dark brick walls, windows boarded shut. The only sounds were the rain and tires hissing over wet pavement. The address Lena gave led us to a small building with a rusted sign. Raven Park Archives. Archives. Angela frowned. They keep records out here. I didn't answer. I stepped out of the car, rain clinging to my coat, my hand gripping my purse like it might hold something capable of protecting me. The door wasn't locked. Inside, it was dark, with only a few flickering fluorescent lights. The smell of old paper, dust, and damp metal hung in the air. Angela stayed close beside me, her eyes moving quickly. Someone used to dangerous situations. Lena, I called softly. No answer. We walked farther in. Tall shelving units were packed with boxes of files. Old city maps hung on the walls. The place felt like somewhere forgotten things were stored. I was about to turn back when I heard footsteps. A man emerged from behind the shelves. Black, around 40, wearing a dark jacket. He looked at me, then at Angela, as if weighing something. "Marianne Lewis," he asked. "Who are you?" I said, "My name is Darius King." He replied, "I work for the man who rented this place." "Lena?" I asked. Darius shook his head. "No, Caleb," my heart slammed. "Caleb is dead. I know," Darius said calmly. "That's why I'm here." Angela stepped forward, her voice cold. "If you're playing games, you picked the wrong place." Darius looked at her, then back at me. "I'm not playing anything. Caleb paid me to safeguard something, and he instructed me that if anything happened, I was only to give it to you. When you came with someone you trusted." My throat went dry. "What is it?" Darius reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with red tape. On it was a small wax seal, not the kind used for love letters, but something meant to preserve documents. "In here," he said, "are copies of papers Caleb didn't dare keep in Unit 19. He called it the second layer. If you read it, you'll understand why he told you not to trust anyone." I reached out to take it. The moment my fingers touched the envelope, the overhead lights flickered violently and went out. The room dropped into darkness, with only faint lights spilling in from the distant entrance. Angela gasped. Someone's. A loud noise came from the doorway. Metal striking metal. Darius cursed under his breath. "We need to go." Now I clutched the envelope to my chest, like a second heart heavy, burning. Angela grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the exit, but I could clearly hear footsteps behind us. More than one person. We ran out into the rain. Angela's car was still there, but something stopped me cold. On the windshield, tucked under the wiper, was a small piece of paper. Angela snatched it and opened it under the streetlight. Just one line. "You didn't listen, and you will pay for it." I turned back toward the building. Darkness swallowed the doorway. No one in sight. But I knew with certainty, someone had been there, waiting, watching us take the envelope. And Naomi, in that moment, I couldn't stop myself from thinking of her. I got into the car, rain pounding against the windows, like knocking. Inside me, only one question remained, one strong enough to pull me into whatever came next. What had Caleb hidden in that envelope that made someone willing to threaten me in the middle of the night? I didn't open the envelope that rainy night. Angela drove fast, both hands clenched around the steering wheel, while I held the envelope against my chest like it might burst into flames if it ever met the light. Rain beat against the windshield in a steady, knocking rhythm, tightening my thoughts until they felt sharp and crowded. I knew that from the moment I took that envelope, I had stepped over a line I couldn't cross back. "You okay?" Angela asked, eyes still on the road. "I don't know yet," I said, "but someone doesn't want me to know the truth." Angela didn't say anything else. She just nodded, like that was enough to understand how dangerous this had become. When I got home, the living room lights were still off. Naomi wasn't there. I couldn't explain why that made me feel relieved and uneasy at the same time. I locked the door, pulled the curtains, and set the envelope on the dining table. The dark red seal looked like an eye watching me. I made tea, but my hands shook so badly I had to set the cup down. Finally, I took a deep breath and tore the envelope open. Inside weren't letters. They were documents, copies of medical records, prescription invoices, a blurry photocopy of an admission report. Caleb's name was on every page, but there were details I had never known. A new heart medication dosage changes that made no sense over the last 6 months of his life. A handwritten note from the attending doctor. Patient response unstable, needs further monitoring. I flipped through the pages quickly, my heart pounding. Caleb had never told me his condition was this serious. He'd only called it getting tired with age. The last page made me sit down. A short ER report noted that during Caleb's final admission, traces of a substance showed up in his blood, something not listed on any prescribed medications. No official conclusion, no investigation, just one cold line, as if someone had decided the question wasn't worth chasing. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Caleb didn't die naturally. At least, not completely naturally. My phone buzzed. Marcus's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered Mom. My son said, his voice heavy. Naomi says, "You're hiding something from me." I closed my eyes. The first hit had landed. "I'm not hiding anything," I said slowly. "I'm just trying to understand a few things." "What things that you can't tell me?" Marcus asked. "Naomi says you've changed. You're cold, distant, like you don't trust us anymore." I could hear Naomi in every word Marcus spoke. She wasn't coming at me directly. She was speaking through my son, Marcus, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Do you trust me?" There was a long silence on the other end. Too long. I don't know," Marcus finally said. "Everything's a mess. And Naomi is the only one trying to keep this family from falling apart." That hurt more than any accusation. "Then who do you think is making it fall apart?" I asked. Marcus exhaled. "I don't want to argue, but Naomi's worried about you. She thinks you're putting yourself in danger." I almost laughed. The real danger was sitting right beside him, but I couldn't say that. "Not yet. Go home," I said. "I need time." Marcus hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down, my hands tightening into fists. Naomi was doing exactly what Lena warned me about. A soft attack. No accusations, no threats, just planting doubt. Little by little, into the only relationship I still had to lean on. The next morning, I went to see Caleb's family doctor. He was an older man who'd looked after both of us for more than 10 years. When I placed the stack of medical records on his desk, he stared at me for a long time before he spoke. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I said. He sighed. "Marianne, there are questions that sometimes the system doesn't want answered." "Do you want to answer me?" I asked. He glanced around the room, then lowered his voice. "Caleb didn't die from heart disease alone, but no one wants to call it abnormal. No family requested an autopsy, no obvious signs of violence. And the substance in his blood?" I asked. "Not enough to conclude poisoning," he said, "but enough to raise questions." Questions. Again, questions left unfinished. As I left the clinic, I got a text from Naomi. "Marcus is really worried. I think you should let this go. Dad is gone." I read it over and over. Let this go. That wasn't advice. That was an order. That night, Marcus came to my house. He stood in the doorway, face tight with stress. Naomi wasn't with him, and that told me she'd arranged this meeting carefully. "Mom," Marcus said, "Naomi thinks you're hurting yourself by digging into this. She's afraid you'll ruin what's left." "Since when do you let your wife speak for you?" I asked. Marcus frowned. "Don't do that. Naomi just wants to protect everyone." "Or protect someone?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Marcus flinched. "What are you saying?" I looked at my son, the child I used to hold, the child I used to shield from anything that could harm him, and I realized that the truth, spoken at the wrong time, could break him. Nothing, I said, I'm just tired. Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, then stopped. When he left, I knew Naomi had won a round. No shouting, no threats, just making my son doubt me. That night, I spread out everything Caleb had left behind and put it in order. And I noticed something I couldn't ignore. Every time he was admitted, Naomi was the first one there. Every time his medication changed, Naomi knew before I did. And if someone could access Caleb's pills, it would be the person living with him during his final year. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. You're moving too fast, a man's voice said. I recognized Darius King. Some people are starting to lose patience. Then tell them I said, I am too. He went quiet for a few seconds. Be careful with your family. The call ended. I sat in the dark, staring at the pages spread across my table like a map of sin and lies. I understood then that from here on out, this wasn't only about Caleb's death. It was about who controlled his final hours. And Naomi, with her gentle smile and perfect concern, was standing dangerously close to the center of it. If there was one thing I knew for sure, it was this. The war had begun, and this time, it was happening inside my own family. Thank y'all for sticking with us all the way to this point. If you busy or gotta go right now, hit that like button so you can find this video easy later. All right now. After Darius's call, I understood that I had entered a phase where every mistake could be paid for in blood. Naomi was no longer relying only on soft pressure through words. She had begun building a wall between Marcus and me, one brick at a time. Concerned messages, reminders about emotional damage, gentle-sounding phrases that all carried the same message: Mom isn't well. Mom is losing control. She did it so skillfully that if I reacted too strongly, I would look exactly like the person she wanted everyone to believe I was. So I changed my strategy. I would not chase Naomi. I would make Naomi step onto my ground. I called Marcus first, my voice calm, like it used to be before secrets poisoned everything. This Sunday, you and Naomi come over for dinner. I said I want to make something simple, not to talk about your father, just for the family to sit together. Marcus was quiet for a few seconds. Naomi says you're tired. Then that's even more reason to come. I replied, my son doesn't need anyone's permission to have dinner with his mother. Marcus exhaled softly. Okay. We'll come. I sent Naomi a short message. Dinner at my place Sunday. I want to thank you for taking such good care of Marcus. I deliberately used the language of politeness, the language Naomi always wore like an outer coat. Then I called Angela. I need you at my house Sunday night, I said, not to eat, to listen. I get it. Angela replied, you're setting a trap. I'm letting her walk into it herself, I said. I didn't tell Angela that I had also invited someone else. Elias Grant, my neighbor, a retired police officer. Elias wasn't close to my family, but he had one habit I needed. I told Elias I'd been feeling unsafe lately and asked if he could stop by that evening under the excuse of checking the locks. Sunday came faster than I expected. I set the table like a ritual. White tablecloth, small candles, roast chicken, made from the old recipe Marcus loved. Nothing extravagant. I didn't want it to feel like a courtroom. I wanted it to feel ordinary so that when the truth surfaced, it would hit harder. In my coat pocket was a photocopy of Caleb's medical report, the page with the note about the unidentified substance in his blood. I didn't plan to show it right away. I only needed one moment where Naomi revealed what she knew or what she was trying to hide. They arrived at 7. Marcus hugged me. Naomi stepped in with a measured smile. She brought a small bouquet of flowers, the kind of gesture a perfect daughter-in-law would make. But I didn't look at the flowers. I looked at her hands. Naomi was wearing a thin ring, white gold. I had never seen it before. New ring? I asked lightly, like I was asking about the weather. Naomi touched it instinctively, like someone afraid of being caught. Oh, an anniversary gift, she said. Marcus gave it to me. Marcus looked down at her hand, slightly confused. I, yeah, right. A gift. A small detail, but enough. Marcus wasn't sure, which meant Naomi was writing the story herself. Dinner started normally. I asked Marcus about work, about his plans for the end of the year. Naomi answered for him more often than necessary, as if she were managing the narrative for both of them. Angela arrived a little later, like a casual guest. Naomi hesitated for just a fraction of a second when she saw her, then recovered her smile. "Hello, Miss Brooks," Naomi said. "It's been a while." I raised an eyebrow. Naomi knew Angela's name, even though they had met only once or twice and never closely. For the first time, I felt a cold surge of anger in my chest. She tracked the relationships around me, carefully, like someone building a file. After the main course, I set my teacup down and said, casually, "I spoke with your father's doctor the other day." Marcus looked up immediately. Naomi did too, but Naomi moved faster. "What did the doctor say?" Naomi asked. I looked straight at her. "He said your father was taking medications I didn't know about." And I started wondering, why? Naomi smiled softly, as if I'd said something emotional. "Maybe you don't remember. That time was hard. You were busy with the funeral, with everything." "No," I interrupted, still calm. "I mean before he passed. During the last 6 months." Silence dropped over the table. Marcus stared at me. "Mom, what are you saying?" I took the photocopy out of my pocket and placed it on the table. I didn't slide it toward Marcus. I slid it toward Naomi. "Read it," I said. Naomi looked at the paper like it was hot. She didn't touch it right away. But in her eyes, I saw something. Not fear. "Calculation. This is private medical information," Naomi said. "Where did you get it from?" "My husband," I replied. "He left it behind." Naomi swallowed. Then she made her mistake. "You're misunderstanding," she said, still gentle. "That substance, sometimes it appears because of drug interactions." The doctors mentioned that. Marcus turned sharply toward her. "You knew about that." Naomi froze for just a fraction of a second. But I saw it. She had said too much. She knew about the substance before Marcus had even read the page. "I just heard your dad mention it," Naomi said quickly. "When you were busy, I took him to appointments sometimes. Don't you remember?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Confusion spread across his face. He didn't remember, and Naomi was counting on that. I was about to continue when the doorbell rang. Elias Grant stepped inside, his expression serious. He didn't bother with small talk. "Marianne," he said, "you need to see this." I followed him into the hallway. Angela stood up and followed too. She heard danger in his voice. Elias led us to the back door. On the step, under the porch light, lay a small object right where I usually placed my foot. A thin, sharp piece of metal, like a broken blade, positioned carefully enough that if I stepped out without looking, I would have landed on it. Elias bent down, picked it up with a gloved hand. "Someone placed this deliberately," he said. "This isn't trash." My scalp went cold. This wasn't a written threat anymore. This was action. I looked back through the doorway into the dining room. Marcus was sitting there, stunned. Naomi was standing by the table, gripping her phone like she was about to call someone or signal someone. She noticed me watching her and immediately put the phone down, switching to a worried smile. "Mom, are you okay?" she called out. "What's going on?" Her voice was sweet, higher than usual manufactured concern, but her eyes weren't panicked. Her eyes were watching my reaction. I walked back into the dining room and said nothing about the medal. I only looked at Marcus and asked, "Son, do you remember who handled your father's medication during his last few months?" Marcus froze. "The meds. Usually Naomi and you." Naomi cut in immediately. "I was just helping. You were grieving, Mom. I thought I should." "Then why did you know about the substance in his blood before Marcus did?" I asked, my voice no longer gentle. Naomi went silent. Marcus stared at Naomi. Angela stared at Naomi. The air thickened. Naomi pressed her lips together, then smiled. A strange smile. The smile of someone cornered who still believes there's an escape. Because I care, she said. Unlike everyone else, Marcus shot to his feet. Naomi, what are you saying? At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. A man's voice came through, low and close, as if he were standing somewhere just outside the house. You see now, he said. You're making things worse. Next time, it won't just be a piece of metal. I ended the call, my hand ice cold. I looked at Naomi. She was already looking at me. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. Naomi wasn't just someone who knew, she was involved, and I had just made her understand that I was not going to stop. After that dinner, I wasn't guessing anymore. Naomi had slipped in front of Marcus. And the most important part wasn't what she said, it was what she knew. You don't casually explain medical details like drug interactions and the substance in his blood unless you've been standing very close to the whole process. But I also understood this. Suspicion alone wouldn't drag Naomi into the light. I needed the thing she feared most, evidence that could be verified. The next morning, I met Angela at her office. She sat behind her desk in a dark blazer, eyes sharp as a blade. I set an enlarged printout in front of her, a close shot of Naomi's hand from the night before. I'd taken it quietly while she was pouring tea. On Naomi's finger, that thin white gold ring caught the overhead light. On the inside of the band was a small mark. I'd seen it when Naomi absent-mindedly turned her hand. You want me to trace this? Angela asked. Not just the ring, I said. I want to trace who gave it to her. And what it has to do with Caleb's meds. Angela studied me for a moment. Okay. But you understand, if I'm going to trace a ring, I need more than a photo. I have more, I said, and pulled out my phone. I showed her a doorbell camera clip from the night before. Naomi stood on my porch before coming in, lifting a hand to fix her hair. In that moment, the porch light hit the inside of the ring just right, and the marking showed clearly, a stylized A inside a hexagon. Angela leaned in and zoomed. That looks more like an organization logo than jewelry. Can you do it? I asked. Angela nodded. Give me 24 hours. I left Angela's office with a strange feeling. I was still afraid. But the fear had changed shape. It wasn't the vague fear of a woman being lied to anymore. It was the sharp fear of someone about to put a real name on her enemy. Around noon, Marcus called me back. My son's voice was rough, tired. Mom, she cried all night. I didn't answer right away. I could picture Naomi crying just enough to soften Marcus, just enough to make herself the victim. Do you believe her? I asked. I don't know, Marcus said. But Mom, she says you're obsessed, that you've convinced yourself Dad didn't die, naturally, like someone did something to him. My grip tightened on the phone. Do you know your father had an unknown substance in his blood? Marcus went quiet. Do you know? I asked. Again, no, Marcus said softly. She didn't say it like that. She didn't say it clearly, but she knew how to explain drug interactions better than the doctor. Marcus sighed. Mom, what do you want me to do? This was the most dangerous moment. If I pushed too hard, Marcus would run back to Naomi out of sheer defensiveness. If I went too soft, Naomi would keep driving a wedge between us. So I lowered my voice. I don't want you to choose me. I want you to choose the truth. And to choose the truth, you have to give me a chance to prove it. Marcus stayed silent so long I thought the call had dropped. Okay, he finally said, do what you need to do. But please be careful. I hung up without feeling lighter. I saw only this. Marcus was standing in the middle, and Naomi was pulling him toward her 1 inch at a time. That evening, I got home early. I checked the locks, checked the windows. I nodded, but I didn't believe the police would do much if all I could say was, I feel threatened. Near midnight, Angela's message came through. Just one sentence. That ring logo belongs to Ardentis Health Supply. Angela spoke fast, voice low. Ardentis is a supply company, medical devices and pharmaceuticals for private clinics, not a normal pharmacy. There have been scattered lawsuits about distribution irregularities, but they got buried. That A in a hexagon logo is tied to an internal program, some kind of membership for people inside the system. What does Naomi have to do with them? I asked. I don't have an employment record under Naomi, Angela said, but I found a shipping file. The recipient matches Marcus's address. The name isn't Naomi. It's N. Williams. My stomach went cold. Naomi's maiden name was Williams. She'd become Lewis after marriage, Angela continued. And there's more. In the last 6 months of Caleb's life, multiple deliveries showed up near your neighborhood, not standard prescriptions. They're listed as supplemental compounds, compounded formulations. My throat burned dry. So someone could have gotten something into Caleb's meds without going through the doctor. Angela didn't answer it directly. She only said, Marianne, this is enough to go to the police. But you need to be careful. If Naomi's tied to our dentist, you're not poking one person. You're poking a network. I was about to respond when the living room lights snapped off. I froze. I knew I'd turned them on. My phone was still pressed to my ear, but I couldn't hear Angela clearly anymore over the drumbeat in my chest. I moved slowly toward the switch. Nothing. A soft, small click came from the kitchen-like metal tapping wood. I backed up one step, my hand shaking but my mind cold. Elias had taught me, if you suspect someone's inside, don't move deeper into the dark. I ended the call and hit 911. But before it connected, a shadow appeared in the hallway leading to the back door. No face, only a tall shape, broad shoulders. Something in that person's hand caught the weak spill of light from the street lamp outside the window. I turned and ran to my bedroom, locked the door, threw the deadbolt. I heard footsteps moving quickly over the wood floor, something falling. The kitchen door yanked open. I spoke into the phone, low and clipped. Someone has broken into my house. My address is... I'm being threatened. In the minutes I waited, I heard rummaging. Not the careless rummaging of someone hunting valuables. They were searching for something specific. I knew it. And only one thought kept repeating. They're looking for Caleb's papers. I pressed the remaining envelope and the file to my chest. I'd hidden them in a locked drawer, but I didn't know whether the intruder had found the key or forced it open. Then I heard glass shatter, sharp and final. Footsteps ran back out. The front door slammed. An engine turned over and tore away. A few minutes later, the police arrived. Red and blue lights swept across my walls, bending everything into something unfamiliar. 2 officers came in and asked if I was hurt. I shook my head, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. They searched the house. The kitchen had been torn apart. A cabinet had been pried open. But the coldest part was this. The intruder didn't take the TV, didn't take jewelry, didn't take cash. They took exactly one thing. The second red-sealed envelope Darius had handed me at Raven Park. I'd hidden it in the kitchen drawer, and I'd believed I was careful enough. I was wrong. The next morning, Marcus showed up on my doorstep, face pale as he saw the officers still writing their report. "Mom, what happened?" he asked. I looked at my son, saw real fear in his eyes, and for the first time in days, I no longer had a reason to keep quiet. "Someone broke in." I said. "They didn't take valuables. They took your father's documents." Marcus frowned. "What documents?" I stepped closer and lowered my voice, each word set like a nail. "Documents connected to your dad's medication. And connected to Naomi." Marcus stumbled back, like I'd slapped him. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." I didn't force it. I simply showed Marcus the printout of the ring logo and the name Ardentis Health Supply, along with the shipping address tied to Naomi's old last name. Marcus stared, his face going bloodless. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he looked up, eyes red, voice rough. "What do you want me to do?" I held his gaze. This was the moment Naomi had tried to prevent from the beginning. The moment Marcus would be forced to choose. "You don't have to believe me," I said. "You only have to do one thing. Bring Naomi here tonight. I'll say it in front of you. And if she's innocent, she won't be afraid." Marcus swallowed hard. "And if she really did it?" I didn't answer right away. I only looked out the window, where the kitchen glass still held a jagged break like a cut across the home I once trusted to be safe. "If she did," I said slowly, "then my son has been living with the person who held your father's medication and maybe held the fate of all of us, too." I had been waiting for this moment for days, but when it finally arrived, I realized I wasn't ready at all. Marcus brought Naomi to my house that evening, just as he'd promised. A police car was parked down the street, far enough not to cause a scene, close enough to leave Naomi no real way out. Naomi walked in first. Marcus followed. She kept her familiar composure. Straight back, relaxed shoulders, a faint smile, worn like a well-timed jacket. But I saw her hand tremble when she noticed the two officers standing on the porch. "What's going on, Mom?" Naomi asked, her concern perfectly calibrated. "Why are the police here?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at Marcus first. "Do you want the truth?" I asked him. "Or do you want to keep living inside a version of things that someone else wrote for you?" He nodded, just slightly. "Tonight," I said, turning to Naomi, "we're not speaking with feelings. We're speaking with facts." Naomi gave a thin smile. "You're overreacting." "Good," I replied. "Then you won't be afraid." I placed 3 items on the table: a printout of the Ardentis Health Supply logo, the shipping records under Naomi's maiden name, Caleb's medical report, opened to the page, noting the unidentified substance in his blood. Naomi looked at them. For a single, fleeting second, the control on her face cracked. Marcus stepped forward and picked up the shipping record. "Naomi, this address is our house." "I can explain," Naomi said quickly. "It's just, explain why you understood my husband's medications better than his doctor." I cut in, my voice calm but sharp. "Or explain why someone broke into my house to steal documents connected to these exact things." Naomi spun toward me. "You think I did that?" "I don't need to think." I said, "I just need to ask. Who's the only person with DIL? Motive, opportunity, and knowledge?" Marcus stepped back. "Naomi, tell me the truth. What did you do with my dad's medication?" She laughed. Not a joyful laugh. A dry, brittle, exhausted sound. "You really want to know?" she said. "Fine. I'll tell you." She looked straight at me now, the softness gone from her eyes. "You think you're the only one who was deceived? You think you're the only one living inside a fake marriage?" "Don't," Marcus said. "Don't do this." "No," Naomi snapped. "It's time." She took a hard breath. "Caleb wasn't the man you worshipped. He used people, discarded them, and called it stability. He left my mother with a life of scarcity, and then went back to being your perfect husband." Marcus stared at her like she was a stranger. "Who is your mother?" Naomi gave a bitter smile. "You never asked." The room went silent. "I didn't kill Caleb." Her voice rising. "I didn't poison him. But I didn't stop it either." The air froze. "There are medications," she said, "that weaken the heart faster when combined. Doctors don't prescribe them together, but the system lets them pass." I just didn't correct it. Marcus shook his head, as if he could shake the words away. "What did you do, Naomi? I let it happen," she shouted, "because he deserved consequences. Because you, the legal wife, never knew you were living on someone else's pain." "I didn't know," I said, my voice breaking. "But that doesn't give you the right to decide who lives and who dies." Naomi looked at me, eyes burning. "You always thought you were noble, but you benefited from his silence." She stepped backward, hands shaking. "You don't understand. I wanted justice." "No," I said quietly. You wanted control. Naomi suddenly turned toward the door. If I leave now? The officers stepped forward, firm and fast. Ma'am, please stay where you are, one said. Naomi spun back. You don't have proof I poisoned anyone. We have enough to investigate, the officer replied. And we have your statement. Naomi looked at Marcus one last time. The anger was gone. What remained was total collapse. You don't understand, she whispered. The police handcuffed Naomi. As she was led out, I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt tired. When the door closed, Marcus sank into a chair. He held his head in his hands, breathing hard, like someone who'd run too far. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I lived with her. I didn't see anything. I sat beside my son and placed my hand on his back. You weren't blind, I said. You trusted. In the days that followed, everything moved quickly. Investigations, questioning, reporters calling. I refused interviews. I didn't want my life turned into a headline. I visited Lena Moore one more time. We didn't talk much. We just sat together. Two women harmed by the same man in different ways. Do you regret it? Lena asked. I thought for a moment, no. But I don't feel light. Lena nodded. The truth isn't meant to make you feel triumphant. It's meant to set you free. That night, I went home and cleaned the living room. I took down old photographs, not to erase the past, but to place it where it belonged, behind me. I understand now that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and justice doesn't always bring peace, but silence always creates more victims. If you're listening to this story and feel a heaviness in your chest, maybe it's because somewhere in your life, you trusted the wrong person too. Leave a comment if you've ever been hurt by the people you trusted most. Like this, if you believe the truth, no matter how painful, still deserves to be spoken. Follow the channel to hear more stories about family, betrayal, and the kind of freedom we rarely dare to name out loud. Because sometimes the most painful loss isn't losing someone, it's realizing you never truly knew who they were.